Hi, my name is Mr. Donald Lee Jones. I'm an engineering teacher at the Linden High School Academy of Science and Technology, and I'm a professional and technical communicator on top of that. And I'm very proud to present my research study for 2022, my actual research study, which is called A Comprehensive Study of the Word Wall in STEM. This topic was brought up to me by Mrs. Horry, and after our first observation with each other, she was concerned about not having a word wall there. And I brought up my concerns of why a word wall isn't there. So I suggested to her that that would be our study for this year. As most of you know, I've already done two. And I wanted to really investigate and get into the hard hitting notions of this study and comprehensive study and word walls, and connect that with my master's thesis, which was involving engineering education because that's my background, but also including rhetoric science and the science behind that, the psychosocial ramifications behind that. So, with that being said, I would like to acknowledge the district administration, Dr. Marnie Hazelton, our superintendent, assistant superintendent Denise Cleary, our principal Yelena Horry, supervisor of math and vocation, not math and science, Mr. Richard Molinaro, supervisor of IT, Mr. Joseph L. Scaldino. And I wanted to include, even though I don't have any direct contact with her, she did come in with Miss Horry once and did an observation on me. I wanted to include Dr. Tartavita because I want her to listen to my recommendations and make this more of a district-wide thing and see what type of amicable resolution we can come up with in terms of my findings and where we should go from here, which is more than likely going to happen at the summative evaluation. Now, we have an abstract, an introduction, a statement of the problem. My lit review consists of three variables: interactive versus physical learning and the relationship between the two, comprehension versus vocabulary. So, reading comprehension, how is that going to interfere with vocabulary, the socio-cognitive construct of writing, how the socio-cognitive construct has everything to do with writing and such forth. And I'll go into that a little later. You're going to get a data analysis with my research methodology, my results, my takeaways, and any personal recommendations, then a conclusion, and then a works cited page. All right, so basically, this is a word wall study that was conducted at the Linden Academy of Science and Technology. I did this and I experimented my introduction of engineering courses, examining the social cognitive construct, like examining their reading levels by taking an assessment and, putting that onto a piece of paper and just examining their scores and making sure that everybody's up to speed. I also examined word recognition versus word comprehension. There's two totally separate meanings, and I'll go into that in my study. Physical word wall being on the board. I'm not against that, but there's a way that we implement that. And basically, I conclude by saying that we need a literacy movement district wide. How often kids should be reading, why they should be reading, and I'll get into that in the study. So, I would like to start off by saying that strong vocabulary leads to the understanding of word appropriateness, and that's going to be in any type of reading situation. When you read more, you have a better understanding of what you're reading, how you're reading it, what appropriately goes there, the tone of the reading, the appropriateness of the reading. It's kind of building up your inference skills subconsciously. So there's constant misconceptions of that in STEM already, and you can definitely see it on the jobs. You get all these high paying engineers who go to these companies like Ford and Google and Twitter and Microsoft, and a lot of them. And then this is how companies weed out the competition. Like, they know that they're the best of the best, but they have a very scientific way of doing their madness. And part of that is common misconceptions of STEM vocabulary. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic, I know a lot of states are opening back up again, feeling comfortable taking off their mask. And it also leads to serious dramatic teaching changes. So, even Linden High School, possibly next year, will be, barring any other major global shutdown, which I personally don't want to happen. We're gonna, we're gonna probably be first year in a long time that's going to be totally in person. So we need to keep on going with that, but we have to have a backup plan because of this quote unquote new normal. So obviously, I'm a big advocate of action research. Research is what I do. And being effective, being a effective way to apply effective teaching skills. So this is what they mean about being innovative. All right. So this study will find um, the effectiveness of the word wall in engineering and vocational education, because I'm a big fan of reading and technical terminology, but you got to learn how to put that in the right place. And what we're going to do that is to examine the socio-cognitive construct of technical reading and writing among students. That's going to be very important because we got the PLTW stuff coming in, and there's going to be money on the table. And when there's money on the table, results have to be produced. So PLTW, from first experience, I teach some of the curriculum right now in my POE and my other introduction. The half-year intro to engineering course is very rigorous and includes a lot of vocabulary as well as a lot of material that you have to read over and understand. So we have to examine the current reading level of our students, in terms of proper placement in certain words, and also to determine whether a physical word wall, an interactive word wall, or no word wall is the most effective way to do things. Now, this is not to say that I do not want a word wall. This is just to say is how do we implement that word wall in? And if there's no word wall needed, then more than likely, if the results show that, then I would recommend it. Despite the fact that I don't think that's never going to happen. And then what do the students think? I think we need to listen to our students more about it, and I think their opinions will count more. So there's two crucibles to this, and this is part of the socio-cognitive construct of writing. The way something is presented, the way something is perceived, and their first impression. So perception is everything. So when you come into a classroom environment is automatically going to set the tone for what that class is going to be like. All right. A student is whether you're going to get the right type of student or the wrong type of student. And I talked about this in my first study back in 2020. When I was talking about getting the right type of students for your class. When you get the right type of student for your class, the student is motivated, they're ready, they're prepared, they already have an idea of what's going to happen. And even if they're dealing with learning disabilities, like I deal with, they're more than likely going to put in a effort, or they're more than likely going to put in some type of extra ingenuity into their product. So a bad perception, is just going to set everybody off course. So perception, and that goes with the word wall too. So when you see something, you already have it in your head of what you're going to think of. So that's the first thing. Second thing, is going to be process. Cognitive manipulation, the output of social construct, because of the variables that are around you, whether it be home distractions, whether it be pests, whether it be underlying mental issues or medical issues, doesn't matter. Cognitive manipulation has a lot to do with everything. So it gives you a general idea of something. So I'm going to go over that with Flower's variable model in a second. And it has to do with the quality of what you're actually putting out. So here's the big problem here. So we're going to examine, the big problem here is examining the purpose of the word wall, the impact of it, and how it impacts the psychological aspects of schema-based learning. So what does that mean? So as we know, schema-based learning is what Flower goes over is chunks and bits of information. All right. So examining the word wall and then using that information to back up what we're trying to do here at Linden High School. So with that, we're trying to hammer home certain terms that might pop up again, and these kids have to highlight it. So we're examining the purpose of that. And so the socio-cognitive theory has everything to do with it, with rhetoric, social dynamics, and then the eventual output of what we want to create. So in order to do that, I have three components. So there's interactive versus physical learning. So the impact of e-learning platforms, comprehension and vocabulary, the difference between the two, and then of course Linda Flowers' theory of the socio-cognitive construct of writing and reading. So I want to dive into interactive versus physical learning first. So interactive versus physical learning. So interactive is a low-cost, non-paper way of learning. So we all know this already. We use Canvas in our rooms. Canvas is a big tool. It's a big help sometimes. Canvas can be a pain, obviously, but Canvas is just a big way for us to help out what we want to get through, right? So Canvas and Zoom was used by LHS last year in a major way, and we continue to use this way in the classroom continuously over and over and over again. But the bad part about that is, and I'm an example of this because I wear special shades, the brightness of the screen triggers headaches. So if you have learning disabilities, and this school is all about quote unquote inclusivity as possible, with ADHD, Asperger's, autism, 504, sleep disorders, or whatever, that can actually trigger something. So if you come in a classroom and you may see kids having their head down, you may see certain things that go on in the classroom. So we wanna hammer home interactive learning. We want to hammer that home. But we also want to minimize as many distractions as possible away from those things that's going to get us off course and give us a bad output. So obviously, the physical is a more traditional way of learning, promotes more inclusivity and proper arrangement of a learning environment. So when I come in, engineering is very physical. When I come in, when I see a room, a quality engineering room, as I stated before, is organized to the T. Easy access. When you have easy access to things there's a higher output. Just I don't like the red tape shouldn't matter here. So when we talk about that, we talk about all these different things. So we want to talk about a proper learning environment, and then when we put a proper interactive model and a physical model together, we have a blended model of learning. And when you have a blended model of learning, you have better results. When we have better results, you have kids that, test scores go up universally. Kids have a better understanding of education instead of them just sitting up there feeling bored or anything else. So when you have a word wall backup, that's very important too. Now, what I'm going to discuss later on in the results section is the proper arrangement of those of that word wall, and how the word wall impacts other ways of learning. All right, proper placement of the word wall, not necessarily having a word wall up and just kids just going to it. It has to be in a proper place. All right, so that leads me on to comprehension and vocabulary. So student spelling skills. I'll use myself as an example. I used to win multiple spelling bees between kindergarten and eighth grade. I would say second grade and sixth grade is some of my biggest wins in spellings. I can spell a word real good. I can recognize it, but then actually comprehending it is another thing. So different learning styles come into play here. Students can recognize a word but may not understand what it means. And that's very prevalent amongst kids with learning disabilities or undiagnosed learning disabilities. They're not experienced readers. And when you're experienced readers, like spelling doesn't come into play as much. You can spell real good. It doesn't have anything to do with that, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you could read real good. And when you read real good, it's a big difference. All right? So, when you read real good, you write real good. And when you write real good, you have a better understanding of word comprehension, word appropriateness, and where it goes. These are college-ready kids that can loves reading because everybody went to college that I'm presenting this presentation to, so you understand how big important reading is. Visual, spatial, and mnemonic learning can only get you but so far until you get to like graduate school, like I did. And that's coming from something personal. You know, so poor reading comprehension. There's a disconnect between the learning and the words. You know, one thing about computer, and I'll give you a great example. Computer science is all about syntax. So if you're a language arts person like Mrs. Horry or Dr. Tardavita is, syntax, all syntax means is sentence structure. So when you see syntax error on computer science platforms, you know, people think, oh, snap, there's some type of high tech thing going on here. No, it means that your code is wrong. You know, and the computer's telling you that your code is wrong. It can't understand it. So as English teachers, you know, and God bless the English teachers here. Um, as English teachers, they have to put up with this every single day, where they have to sit down and they have to rewrite things over again, and look at very good writing samples and very bad writing samples. But those teachers, as well as myself, can tell who the experienced readers are and who's not the experienced reader. Okay, even though the less experienced reader may be more intelligent per raw IQ, but they're not as well as like a person who would read like The Great Gatsby or The Merchant of Venice. So that brings me to the socio-cognitive construct of reading and writing. And it's one of my honors to present this lady to you if you haven't heard her. Her name is Linda Flower. And when I was at NJIT for my certificate in technical communications, the professor that was in my master's thesis, because I got the certificate and then the master's at Rutgers, and I was going to bring my master's thesis to Rutgers. And I eventually got it like 3 months later. It's a long story. But the best thing about her is that I read her research, and what I was trying to get through. And NJIT, a professor introduced me to her research, and she actually coined the socio-cognitive theory of construct, the socio-cognitive construct. And what we want to break down here is the social brain function of how we produce things. So the social and psychiatric variables of writing. So what is the learner learning? How are they learning it? Why are they learning it? The socioeconomic factors. And Linden has a diverse socioeconomic background. You know, the slang and everyday use of words. You know, what are we trying to get? What's A going to equal to B? What's X going to equal to Y? What's Y is going to equal to Z? And all this other stuff. So psychological and other impeding factors while learning. You know, imagery and presentation is everything. So I talk a lot about the presentation of something, and I was talking about it with different administrators over the years. And my big thing is that I'm not against, no teachers against the word wall. That ain't the issue. It's the presentation of the word wall, and Dr. Flowers' research shows it. When we get PLTW, which should be this summer, one of my big things, especially going towards the end of the year, is getting rid of a lot of that junk and that outdated technology that's in there, and actually create a space just so we could have a word wall on the board, so I can consistently go back to the PLTW curriculum, and then they'll have the keywords right then and there. You know, because PLTW does have vocabulary in it, strong vocabulary in it, and they want to highlight those things. You know, however, we have to have the presentation and how it looks on paper. Psychologically, the way a font looks and presented. Even this presentation that I'm presenting you, everybody has a perception or some type of impression of something. You know, so if it looks too cheesy, like you're trying to do too much, nobody's going to take it seriously. Let's not kid ourselves, you know, so we have to actually focus on that a little bit more. All right. So here we have Flowers' variable model, in which we have our brain, and we have this big circle in the middle that has our impression, our psychological makeup, and our feelings. So the thing that's being presented is the big circle. And then this is our brain going through everything, you know, right here, you know, and through those things, our feelings or psychiatric makeup, this could be learning disabilities or whatever, our impression and how we're feeling, this is what's going to create the learning output or the demonstration of mastery. That's Flowers' theory in a nutshell. So, what did I do? What was my action here? So, what I did was is I took the most common class that I had, which was the Introduction to Engineering class, periods 2, 3, and 9, which will be labeled as class A, B, and C. They had a mixed method survey, they had qualitative responses, and quantitative numeric responses. So basically, it was a scale from 1 to 10. I'll go into that a little later. And they had a fill in the blank assessment that measures their reading comprehension, their word knowledge, understanding the words and their meanings, and then proper placement of the words. So the research methodology, the number of students that took the survey was n equal. The number of students was 51. The number of students that took the assessment was 60. They got a quiz grade for this. So it's not like I didn't like. A lot of kids didn't do good on it. So I'm not gonna just put like, oh, you got a 7 out of 14, you failed. No, for participating, they automatically get an A on the quiz. All right, it did not count on my SEO final observations either. There were 3 different presentations of the word wall, a physical word wall, an interactive word wall, and a limited word wall. So what do I mean by limited? So basically I took the word wall down, and then on some days I put the word wall back up. And I wanted to see this. Now understand this. I didn't do this on purpose to prove a point. I'm well within district regulations, district policy with what I did with this study. So this is the assessment right here. You're gonna get a copy of it. If you can't see it, I wrote a basic letter, and there was a word bank up top. So what they had to do is they had to match the word with the fill in the blank, and these were key. These were the same words that I put up on the word wall, and this was their assessment. All right. So it was a basic letter. They were to read and assess it, and then give it back. So, students selecting from the bank the appropriate word. I've already went over that. So, students can answer 1 through 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the best. Question 4 does not have a numerical value to it with the survey. The survey asks, does it help with your word wall? Does a word wall help with your vocabulary? Students responded to that with a number, and then they answered with a qualitative response down below. And they did that for every question except for question 4, which with the numbers, which asks, do you prefer a word wall that's either interactive on the wall visibly in front of you or none? So here's what I found. So out of the classes that took the assessment, we had about class A had about 7.6 out of 14 words. That's a decent score that took the assessment. And that was the class that had the physical word wall. The interactive class had 4 out of 14 with 18 students, and then obviously class C didn't have that much experienced readers or kids that were interested at all. So, but that was a 3.1 out of 14. So this tells me right away that class A, took this seriously, and not only did they take it seriously, they really, really had their eye on the ball a little bit. And the word wall, the physical word wall helps. So that's proof that a physical word wall helps with an assessment. And that's very telling because we're going to go to the survey questions. So with question 1, does a word wall help with vocabulary? The class average was a 6.8 out of 10, which is decent. And I would like to take a quote. If it's in people's view, they can see it more. Class C, the people that don't have a word wall, had a 7.4 average, saying it would be nice to see them, but I wouldn't look at it too much. So right again. So when I look at this and I look at the answers to this survey, it's a very telling answer, obviously. So it would be nice to see them, but I wouldn't look at it too much. It goes back to perception. All right. We have to be organized before the year starts so we can present a well-registered product. So the kids want to know the terminology. It's obviously there, but the way it's being presented, and are we organized before that? It goes back to my first study about kids being in the appropriate place. So, question 2, does a word wall help you understand complex engineering technology? The class average gave it a solid 6, with class A being the highest, and students who did not have engineering as a career didn't pique their interest. So So what I'm saying is that kids that really scored low, most of those kids didn't want to do engineering, so they really didn't care. So those numbers could be skewed a bit. But 6.1 isn't a bad score. Uh, Question 3. Does a word wall help you formulate certain concepts together? And the class average was a 6.3, with class A and class C radically coming up with different answers. And there's multiple responses with that. So with class 3, class A had the better reading scores. At a, I think it was at a 7.6, but they don't think that a word wall helps them, formulate certain concepts, and it could be because they're already experienced readers already. So, but we may not know. 5.9 is a good score, So people have their own interpretations of that. So I'm going to skip to question 5 before I go into question 4. Question 4, does a word wall help you with learning long term? The average was a 6.7, with class C coming back with a higher average. And one of their responses was yes, but that's if you remember the words on the wall. So this goes directly into word recognition versus word comprehension. So these kids are trying to remember what the word means instead of understanding how to apply the word in the first place. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to hammer that home permanently. We want to hammer it home permanently. We want to hammer it home permanently with them. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We want to hammer that word home. So we want to take it from a sociological aspect and then bring it up to speed. So do you want a word wall in front of you? Now, here's the interesting thought here. Now, I didn't talk about Class B at all. Class A and Class B, for the most part, want a physical word wall, but Class B wants an interactive word wall. And if you look at the results, and I'm going to go into you can look for the responses for yourselves. I guess this was because of they was just comfortable with a physical word wall in front, interactive word wall in front of them. So more than likely, they're going to get used to that type of stuff over and over and over and over again. So if you bring an interactive word wall in front of them, they're going to feel more comfortable with a word wall in front of them. It's all about the presentation. So my takeaways and my recommendation to the district. My takeaways is that physical works, but an interactive word wall will complement for the actual word wall of the content. The implementation of the word wall is essential. It showed in the results. It showed in the literature review. I thought of that right away. It's the presentation of it. So as classroom aesthetics is everything, I don't think nobody's going to disagree with me on that one. I also think that once again, it should be directly in front of you. It should be easy access. These words should be easy access. So a kid can look on the board and then have that word wall available. It could be index cards. It could be little mini screens. It could be, a bulletin board. But we got to rearrange the space so that every classroom in the high school and as well as in this district is consistent and is in synchronous with one another. Okay? So proper accommodation, I really don't have to explain anything more about that. Observing our students, making sure our students get the proper care. I don't think that's going to be a big issue. So my recommendation, as again, the total rearrangement of the room to accommodate learning, especially with the STEM, me, myself, Miss Uden, Mr. Valentino, and Miss Sopa Vader becoming PLTW certified teachers. That's got to be important because one thing you're going to start hearing next year is the EOC, the end of course assessment, in which that's everything. We want our kids to get no lower than 4s, but we want to stay above a 7. If we stay above a 7, we get college credit. And if we get college credit, we boost our state profile a little more. We get to be that school that has the correct STEM curriculum and the program function and sequential college school to college pipeline, and also we'll have a quality athletics program to go along with it. Dr. Tartavita, this is specifically for you, a district-wide literacy initiative. So we should be promoting comfortable learning and comfortable reading settings. You know, we want our kids to at least, even the ones with reading comprehension, we want them to have a comfortable learning settings for. We want to promote at least 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes a day will be just fine. All right, 20 minutes a day would be just beautiful. And I know one staff member in your department talked about it with me as their kids go to Nutley. You know, he's not like other districts where we're hammering. Oh, we got to read every book in the world within the next 3 hours. No, you just 20 minutes. You know, similar to the Book It program back in the 1990s. Simply fine. Possible see the social media outreach. You know, once again, social media, district ran platforms, district ran everything. You know, that's what we should be pushing for. More physical and paper assignments. I cannot push this hard enough. You know, when you have more physical paper assignments, this is, you know, students will get the impression that you're trying to promote more reading. When you promote more reading, the our NJAS scores go up, all these state assessments go up, and you know we'll be more in the clear. You know, so working with our guidance department and working with our special needs team department will be just fine. And most importantly, and above all else, a designated area for the word wall. I cannot say this enough. It has to happen. It must happen. It cannot be anything shorter than that. It's just due. You know, putting a simple word wall in front of the classroom or in a place where a teacher is at where they can constantly refer to the word wall. You know, so these are the things we want to hammer and take home to our kids. And I'll conclude by saying this: we got to be rhetoric advocates in order for this thing to work. You know, we just can't have a word wall up there because kids are not going to take it seriously if it's poorly executed. We can't save them all, but we can save the majority. All right. So we want to save if we're gonna go for everybody, but if some kids slip through the cracks, we don't want to leave those kids behind. But if they can't meet high standards or the possible high standards that we're implementing in this district, then it's just the way it is, you know. But we have to be rhetoric advocates at the end of the day. So I thank you. I look forward to seeing some of you at the summative and discussing this with you personally. This is my works cited page. This is Mr. Jones, and I'm out.